Yeah, yeah. That's what I was gonna say about the exorcist channel that we bring in and stuff.
And then we can talk about, are there different, can you get a Jewish jinn, can you get a Christian jinn?
Like the mosque is if everyone needs that, it's open corner control.
Okay, so I think we shut that kitchen door because I don't want any of the batter.
So all I have to do is switch the camera and your light.
It says now live. It says now live.
So the stream started. What streams do is switch the camera and you can start.
It's on. Are we live?
The stream is live. It's just a blank picture.
Okay. So when do we know we're live?
You tell me when you're ready.
How long will it take you to put it?
2 seconds.
Okay, so wait, one sec, Zayn.
Zayn?
You've given us 3 mics, do they all work?
No, we're sharing these.
Okay, so I'll put this.
And don't ask what happened to the jinn, yeah?
What do you mean?
Oh, come on.
Nothing happened to the jinn. Like,
What do you mean, they're still here?
Yeah, they're still here. Like, nothing happened to them, yeah?
Okay, there's one, you know Prophet Noah, apparently in his ark, the story I heard, that Imam Ali's rule was in Prophet Noah's ark or something.
Don't open that again, man.
And then apparently
open
Prophet
that.
Noah said to the people, don't go to the bottom level of the ark. And then Jinn apparently went down there and he had his arm cut off.
Yeah, that sounds really dodgy.
And then this Jinn lived till the time of Prophet Muhammad, and he went to see Prophet Muhammad one day, and he saw Imam Ali in the mosque, but he didn't know who he was, and he ran away. He's gonna die soon. What are jinns? So shall I ask him that?
No, I'm sorry. You're doing the countdown, you're saying.
And then I'll pass it to you.
Then we just have a bit of back and forth and then we go in.
Doesn't Hassan look a bit different to you, Sheikh? Something's
No,
changed.
we're doing it after. I haven't started it.
No, that's how we'll start off.
Yeah, yeah.
With that.
No, not like that, straight.
Maybe that. Sheikh, assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to today's podcast with Sheikh.
The jinn took
The jinn.
That's what I'm gonna say.
That's what you say. The jinn barbers. Okay. Zayn, you ready? Oh, for God's sake. Three, 2, 1. So we've started. Start. We're ready to go. Okay, all right. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to the Bethel Society's podcast. Today we have a very special topic. It was meant to be done on Halloween, but unfortunately, caught our timing. We're a bit late. So the topic today is jinns, and I'm joined with my co-host, Brother Hassan, and our very own resident alim, Sheikh Anwar Jaffer. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam, Sheikh. Now, how are you?
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.
How's everything going?
Alhamdulillah.
Unfortunately, obviously, we wanted to do this topic at Halloween, but
Yeah, we
things didn't work out.
We intended for Halloween, but someone took a break.
Unfortunately, eh? Living the life.
Ahsant.
How's everything else? Good?
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
We haven't done this for quite a while. When was the last time we did it?
This feels very unnatural
Eh?
to hold the mic in the hand
You used to.
and to talk.
Used to that.
Yeah.
Right.
How are you guys?
We're good.
Alhamdulillah. It's been a while since we've had a podcast. The last one was during Arba'in, yeah? With Sheikh Safdar.
No, yeah, we had Sheikh Safdar
Yeah,
on the
Safdar Razi.
25th of September. I had a look. And then with Sheikh Hilli was the first 10 days. End of August? 9th of Muharram. So been about a couple of months. And since then,
Yeah,
some people's appearances have changed.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
It relates to the topic.
MashaAllah. So Hassan, what happened to the ponytail?
It relates to the topic, as we know. Our topic tonight is jinns, and
Jinns.
it looks like a jinn didn't like the way my hair looked after 2.5 years and seemed to have snipped it off. So there we go. But yeah, let's get into the actual topic itself. Obviously,
Inshallah.
jinns is it's one of those topics that goes in and out, so many different theories and everything. But can we actually start off of what an actual jinn is? Like, what is their purpose? Like, where did they come from, essentially?
It's a very interesting question. Well, first and foremost, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a very, very interesting question. And the reason being is because the reason why we have so much interest in knowing about jinns is because of the scare factor that goes behind it, right? And we intended this session to be during Halloween. And Halloween, you look at the media, Hollywood, you get that culture of horror,
Yeah, gore.
gore, gothic style movies, some of them with jinns in them. So it kind of exacerbates the idea, what is the jinn? What's their purpose? Do they exist? Do they harm us? We'll talk about all of this, inshallah, slowly,
Inshallah.
step by step. But coming back to the question, the reason why we have such, within our communities, within the Islamic community as a whole, the reason why we're so scared of jinns is because of the jahala that we have. We don't know who they are.
Yeah.
We don't know much about them. And because there's a lot of unknown factors to their creation, you find that a lot of myths have kind of seeped into
Yeah.
what we know about them. And it enhances the fear factor. When in reality, the jinn are just like human beings.
Okay.
Yeah, they live in this world. They have responsibility the way we have responsibility. They live their life the way we live our lives. Just before the session, you asked whether they have schools and whatnot. Why not? We have a civilization as humanity. They may have their civilization as a humanity, as jinns. It's not like they're, pre-modern caveman style lifestyle that they adhere to. No, they could have their own civilization. Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, the jinns were on the earth before Prophet Adam came.
Ahsant. Yeah. So there's an ayah in the Holy Quran where God talks about this. He says that we created the jinn min qabl, before the creation of mankind. So when you look at their creation from that perspective, they've existed before mankind. How long before? We don't know, but definitely. If you look at the story of Shaitan, in Nahj al-Balagha, when Imam Ali talks about Shaitan and how he used to live amongst the angels, this was before the creation of Adam, that he worshipped Allah 2,000 years before, or how many thousands of years before creation of Adam. So Shaitan is a jinn, and he lived even before the creation of Adam. So we have all of these evidences there. When the ulama were asked specifically, what exactly are the jinn? They said, look, the jinn, they have free will the way human beings have free will. They have emotions the way we have emotions. They have families, they have tribes, they have everything that we have, they have as well, right? They're able to make choices, we're able to make choices. There's not much difference between mankind and jinn, except for the physical factors. We're created from teen, they're created from an-nar.
So something I've heard a lot about jinns is, or the way they've been described to me, is they sort of have special powers.
Yeah.
Where they can, for example, do black magic on people, or a human being, or a jinn can, do something to a human, harm them in an indirect way, for example.
Yeah.
So what is the sort of the reason behind it, or why have the jinns been given powers, for example, and us humans are?
All right, before answering that question, because you've jumped like the entire session, you've gone.
Yeah, bro, you've gone.
You've gone towards the end of the session right there in the second question. We'll come back to that. Just repeat that question towards the end. We'll talk about the juicy parts towards the end, inshallah.
I wanted to come back to what you were saying earlier. So you were saying, they live their lives the way they do. They got free will, just like how we do. Obviously, as humanity, the human race, we have different religions, different ideologies, do they also have a similar sort of thing? Are they essentially jinns that don't believe in Allah, or are they jinns that are essentially not Muslim, or
Yeah.
polytheists even?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There are jinns of different sects, there are jinns of different religions, there are jinns of different madhabs. There's a very interesting verse in the Quran where Allah says, speaking about the jinn, He says, وَأَنَّ مِنَّا الصَّالِحُونَ وَمِنَّا دُونَ ذَلِكَ. And there are from amongst the jinn who are righteous. Salihun, just like how there are human beings who are righteous human beings. And then there are those who are not righteous. There are those who believe in the message of the Holy Prophet. There are those who don't believe in the message of the Holy Prophet. There are those who violate God's laws just as how human beings violate God's laws. The revelation of Surah Al-Jinn, right? Why was the surah revealed in the first place? It's because according to some revelations, narrations, they say that the revelation was because the Prophet, he was on his way to Ta'if. He was attacked in Mecca. He lost hope in the people of Mecca momentarily. He said, you know what, let me go to Ta'if and I'll spread the message there. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
He came back to Mecca. As he was coming back to Mecca, he stopped in a valley. And when he was in that valley, he began, revelation was given to him, and he began reciting these verses. And from amongst them, there was a group of jinn. They were listening to these verses. And when they heard these verses, they realized that, hold on a second, these verses are actually...
They mean something,
more. It's actually quite powerful.
Yeah.
These aren't normal words. These aren't normal words from a normal man. These are divine words. When they heard these verses, they were attracted to it. They were affected by it. They followed the message of the Holy Prophet. They converted to Islam. And they went back to their own people, their own, al-Jan, and they began propagating the message of Islam. So you have this idea of jinns being of different sects.
Yeah.
According to some narrations, they say that these jinns, they were Jewish.
Okay.
Yeah, so they used to follow the message of Nabi Musa alayhi salam until the revelation of Rasulullah came towards them. So yeah, we absolutely believe the fact that there are jinns who are of different sects, different madhabs, different religions as well.
So did the prophets and the imams have a direct interaction with the jinns then?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So for example, when we come to a Maulana for a question, can the jinns do that?
Yeah, so they did, absolutely. In Masjid al-Kufa, there is one of the maqam is known as Maqam al-Dhu'ban. Historically, they say a snake, when the Imam Ali alayhi salam was there, a snake came towards him and kind of came towards the ear of the Imam and whispered something. And when the companions saw this, they were like, well, what's going on here? And then the snake left, the Imam spoke to him, and the snake left, and then the Imam turned to the companions and said that was one of the jinn. He had a question, he came and he asked me, and I answered.
So does that actually mean that jinns can actually take different forms, essentially, isn't it? We'll come on to.
Absolutely. So this whole different form things, it has a backdrop to it, right? There's a background ideology behind it. Now, the Quran, the fundamental question you guys didn't ask me.
What question were you looking for?
What are the jinns made of?
Fire.
What's the nature of the jinn? Go on, let me flip this around then. Go on. Huh?
So I would say from what we've heard about Shaitan and the way he was towards Prophet Adam, I would say by nature the jinns are quite angry jinns.
Why do you say that?
Because they're made of fire, and
would it be correct for you to say that the whole of mankind is angry? You'll have a jinn somewhere saying, all of mankind are like...
Yeah, they might do. Maybe they've got a podcast out there that we can have a look at. See what... Yeah, maybe they do. But I think from what we've been told, or the propaganda that we've been given around jinns, it seems that there's a lot of bad that comes from them.
Bad press.
They get a lot of bad press.
Believable?
I mean, I've never spoken to a jinn or had an interaction with one, so I'm not too sure.
Being racist to a whole species, eh? Jinnophobic. I like that, it's quite catchy. When you look at the jinns, the Quran mentions that the nature of the jinn is that they're made of fire, smokeless fire. Now fire compared to teen, clay, that we're made of, these two elements are vastly different.
Yeah.
Right? Clay is more, it's stern, pure? Maybe, pure. It's solid. Fire is like air. It's you would say immaterial, not immaterial, but very weakish element, like air. You can't see oxygen, can you? It's all around us, but we can't see it. The same way the jinn, they're made of fire, smokeless fire. That's the element that they're made of. So they're essentially like air. We can't see them. Some people, they come forward and they say, well, the jinn, they live in a different dimension in this world, right? You could argue by saying that, no, but the jinn live the way we live, in our dimension. It's not like they live in a separate dimension from us. If shaitan lives in a separate dimension from us, then how can he affect us? Does he have the power to cross dimensions into the human dimension and affect the human beings? There's no proof behind that. When Allah says, وَخَلَقَ الْجَانَّ مِن مَارِجٍ مِّن نَارٍ, that we created the jinn from fire, it means that their element is like air. We can't see air, we can't see oxygen, nitrogen, we can't see all of these different elements, but it's there in front of us. We breathe it. Likewise, the jinn, the element that they're created from is very, very raqiq, it's very light.
Okay.
Yeah? So they may even exist with us in our dimension, except that we can't see them.
So let's say, for example, we have a mosque here, right? Can a jinn come and sit in this mosque?
Why not? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah? So there's a very interesting ayah in the Holy Quran. إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ. So Allah is talking about the shaitan, number one, Iblis, and his entourage, his army. Right? He says, إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ. So they can see you. Shaitan and his إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ وَهُوَ قَبِيلُهُ. He huwa وَقَبِيلُهُ. He can see you and his army can see you. The jinn can see the human beings. مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُ. Except that you cannot see them. So if you say that, no, the jinns live in an extra dimension separate from the human dimension, then they wouldn't be able to see us. But the Quran tells us something opposite. They can see us, we can't see them.
They have an advantage, basically. Isn't it?
Do they?
They can see us and we can't see them.
Okay, that's a very good, very, very, very interesting perspective. But then let me ask you a question. Who is greater, the jinn or the insan? Why?
If they're given the same choices, why would it be any different if you said they've got free will, we've got free will?
Isn't there some sort of saying or quote that man can either be higher than the angel or worse than a jinn?
No,
Isn't it something like that?
worse than the animals.
Worse than the animal. Okay.
Yeah?
So are we the same?
I'm saying that.
So you just said that the jinn have a higher
If they're
advantage.
given the same tests as us, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, they've got one more advantage in us that they can see us and we can't see them, right? But I would say in terms of statuses, it depends how the jinn himself is, of how the religiosity, how pious they are, how much taqwa they have. Essentially, they can still be more spiritual than us.
But their element, we're talking about their elements, right? The nature of their creation and the nature of our creation.
No, so
Who
we're
is
greater. We're greater.
Why?
Because fire can be put out with water.
Why? What can I say about clay?
Clay can be remolded with water. It can be hardened with fire. So we can go with the flow.
We can go with the flow. Imam Sadiq was asked, alayhi salam, he was asked, who are greater, the jinn or insan? Very interestingly, he narrates the story of Iblis. And Iblis, the anger that he demonstrates when Allah says prostrate to Adam, he becomes angry, yeah? His anger was something, you couldn't extinguish that anger. It exists even today. لَأَغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. His anger demonstrated at such a level that he said, you know what, God, I'm going to misguide as many from mankind as possible. That's my sole mission as long as I'm alive.
His revenge.
A revenge.
Just quickly on that, can shaitan affect the jinn?
Huh?
So you know how shaitan can whisper in our ear to do sins or whatever?
Yeah.
Can he do that to the jinn as well?
That's a very good question. I'll come to that.
Okay, fine.
I thought Iblis is a jinn essentially.
Yeah, but that's what I'm wondering. If he's a jinn, can he affect another jinn? Or is it the fact that he can affect us because he is a jinn? He's different from us.
the king of jinns, Shaitan. So, you know, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that when you look at the story of Adam, he says, don't compare teen with fire, clay with fire. Leave that perspective aside. Look at the ruh of Adam. He says, Shaitan, he believed that fire was greater than clay because fire, you know, it's a form of nur. It gives light. It says, look at the ruh of Adam alayhi salam. The ruh of Adam is so powerful, it's ashaddun nayran. It's the greatest of all lights. Greater than the light of the jinn as well. Yeah, the fire of the jinn as well. So it says, go to the ruh of Adam. See what Adam is made of and then compare that to the jinn. Even that, beyond that, if you compare, actually, no need to compare. Look at the message of the Holy Prophet of Islam. The message of Islam, the message of Nabi Musa alayhi salam. We just mentioned, right? There are jinns who are Jewish, there are jinns who are Christian, there are jinns who are Muslim.
Yeah.
These messages are brought forth by
Prophets.
man. Yeah, human beings. The Quran says, there are salihun amongst the jinn, those who follow the message of Islam. The message of Islam essentially was presented by the Prophet, who was a human being. Yeah. So from that perspective, you realize that the human beings have a higher advantage than jinns.
Okay.
Yeah. Even amongst some of the ulama, there are certain quotes narrated by them. I've heard these quotes, but I haven't actually managed to rectify whether they actually said them or not. But you know, the general belief is no, human beings definitely have a higher advantage than jinns. Yeah, from that perspective.
I've got a question come in here from somebody who's listening. It says, what happens to jinns who are good when they die?
What happens to human beings when they die? Barzakh. We all go into barzakh. There is heaven and hell associated with it, punishment, reward, everything that happens to a human being. Because remember, essentially the only difference between a human being and a jinn is that they are made of fire, we're made of clay. They have the power to make choice. The sharia has been given to them the way it's been given to us. They know right from wrong. They know good from bad, halal from haram. And they are judged.
It's essentially how they've lived their life, isn't it?
Exactly. The moment they die, then obviously they will be taken towards the hereafter. And the process of the hereafter will begin for them the way it begins for us. There's a very interesting verse on the Day of Judgment. وَأَمَّا الْقَاسِطُونَ فَكَانُوا لِجَهَنَّمَ حَطَبًا. Allah speaks about the qasitun, those who, they were deviators, those who were misguided, and those who misguided others as well. On the Day of Judgment, they will be the fuel for the fires of hell. Allah doesn't say man, from mankind. He leaves it a very open-ended verse,
right?
Meaning that the jinn and insan, the qasitun from amongst them, they will be the fuels for the fires of hell. So everything that you know about Jannah, Jahannam applies also to
them as well.
Them as well.
Essentially on their taqwa and their amal, how they live their life.
Exactly.
A point I wanted to bring up as well was we were just talking about Iblis being the king of shaitans, you said, and he's still living till today. So if he was before Nabi Adam alayhi salam, is this applicable to all jinns that they live for a very, very long time, would you say? Compared to us humans?
Very, very interesting. There's a hadith from the Holy Prophet of Islam. They see that some of the companions were with the Prophet, and a jinn came towards them, and they engaged in a dialogue. So the Prophet and the jinn, and the Prophet asked the jinn. He said, "What's your age? How old are you?" Mankind, we live for about 100 years. If a person reaches a century, it's like
he's lived his life.
He's lived his life, exactly. So the Prophet asked him, he said, how old are you? And the jinn replied, he said, I was there the moment Habil was killed by Qabil.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was there alongside Nabi Nuh, and I witnessed all of the events of the flood. He says that, I was there alongside Nabi Musa, I was there alongside Nabi Isa, the way I am alongside you today.
Wow.
Yeah,
so I would say then that's our advantage over them then, eh? They have
life.
a lot more to answer for on the Day of Judgment.
Yeah, exactly. You could ask why. Why is that the case? Well, they're created from fire, right? Fire is a completely different element compared to clay. Number two is wisdom of Allah. Allah chooses for them to live a very long life. That's in His wisdom. Yeah, we may not really know the true reason as to why they live longer than us. You're deep in thought. Absolutely deep in thought. You're lost.
So, speaking of the life thing then, so
Yeah.
has God basically granted Shaitan the ability to live till the end of mankind?
Yeah.
So
According to the verse.
Shaitan can't die, basically.
Yeah. إلا بإذنه. Except for or by his permission, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. Shaitan worshipped Allah for many, many years,
Yeah.
many centuries, yeah. A couple of millennia as well. And when he transgressed and he refused to perform sujood, he turned to God and he said, look, I've worshipped you so many years. Grant me something in return. He says, what do you want? He says, I want to exist until Yawmuddin.
Okay.
God says, fine.
So then Shaitan will live for the entire humanity
Yeah.
till the day of judgment, and then he'll be questioned for everything he's done.
He'll die, be resurrected.
Oh, so you know how every soul shall taste death?
Yeah.
Does that apply to all the jinns as well then?
Absolutely.
So jinns have souls.
Yeah.
Okay.
كل نفس ذائقة الموت. Every single human being, as well as the jinn, will taste death.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then obviously the day of judgment will take place, and they'll go through the same process procedures that we will go through.
So they'll get the questioning in the grave as well. They'll go to. So in Barzakh, will we be able to see the jinns then? Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll just basically be one place where all the humans and all the jinns are together.
Yeah. My Thursday's lecture, we mentioned this, yeah, Hassan?
I nipped out to get you some water, if you remember, so I might have missed it.
Ahsant. When Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, لو كشف الغطاء ما ازددت يقينا. He says, if the veils were to be uncovered from my eyes, my yaqeen will not increase. And the idea is, it's built in the verse of the Holy Quran. When Allah says, فَكَشَفْنَا أَنْكَ غَطَاءَكَ, that we will uncover the veil of your eyes the moment you pass on from this earth. That when you die, when the final, when you close your eyes for the final time, when your ruh is then taken away, that's when your eyes open in the hereafter. And everything will be uncovered for you. Heaven, hell, jinn, malaika, the souls of human beings, the souls of the past, reward, punishment, everything will be uncovered for you. That's when the human being will realize the true reality of life.
Yeah.
But as long as we're alive in dunya, those veils exist. And we're blocked from that. Imam Ali comes forward and says that even if that was uncovered for me now, it wouldn't raise my yaqeen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So coming to that as well, like, we have this thing called basira, foresight, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody reaches such a maqam, like not obviously like the imams, but say like some of the ayatullahs and things like that, where their piety is so high and they have that basira as well, is it a possibility that they can actually communicate and see jinns as well?
So actually there's two opinions on this. The question essentially is, can a human being communicate with the jinn? There was one group that said absolutely not. Yeah, there's no possibility in it whatsoever. This is not something that's acceptable by the majority, the consensus of the ulama.
Yeah.
The second group says no, you can. Sheikh al-Mufid, Sheikh al-Tulsi, they're of this opinion, that we do have, or we can have certain communications with the jinn. Right? Just as how the Anbiya, just as how the Imams had communication with the jinns. How the process of that is conducted, we don't know.
It's only when you reach that level.
Only when you reach that level. Yeah, the more closer you get to Allah, the more spiritual you are, the less veils exist between you and Allah. Yeah, and that's why you can really see reality at that stage. When we talk about, the likes of Marhum Sayyid Muhammad al-Mar'ashi, Muhammad Husayn al-Mar'ashi, buried in Qum, the likeness of Sheikh al-Bahjat. We speak about their wonderful stories, and it's absolutely possible for them to be of a spiritual maqam, and the veils are less for them.
So essentially that is a plausible thing that we can actually
Absolutely,
communicate.
yeah, definitely.
So what about the jinns who communicate with us? Do they need to have some sort of spiritual level, or can they just do it if they please?
Going back to the verse of the Quran, they can see us, but we can't see them. So it's like a one-sided relationship, really, isn't it? Yeah?
So they have the ability, could they have the ability to communicate with us if they wanted to?
I don't know. I don't know. But speaking about communications, again, very interesting. Ayatollah Khomeini was of the opinion that it's absolutely haram to communicate with the jinns.
For us?
For us.
Okay.
So using Ouija boards, for example, all of that.
You have that all in the Hollywood industry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of horror movies made on that. Ouija boards.
Ouija boards. He says this is absolutely haram. Sayyid al-Khoi, rahmatullah alayhi, Sayyid al-Sistani, hafadahullah, they say, look, you can communicate with the jinns. Sorry, he says you can't communicate with the jinns unless it doesn't bring you any harm. So, mostly, nowadays, whenever people communicate with jinns, it's usually, voodoo, black magic, witchcraft, to kind of attack someone. If it's for all of that purposes, haram. Absolutely haram. Qat'an haram. There's no shadow of a doubt in that. Is there a need for someone to actually communicate with the jinns? Other than that?
Curiosity kills the cat.
Huh? Is there a benefit to, randomly try and communicate with the jinn?
I guess not. I mean, I can't think of a reason to, and the only reasons that I ever discussed about people communicating with the jinns is the black magic, the voodoo, the possession, things like that. We're not really told that. We're never really told that jinns do anything else except for that. But in terms of, one thing I've heard is where jinns situate themselves. I've been told that it's normally in forests. Under trees. They say don't walk under trees at night time because the jinns are up there. Is there anything behind that?
There's a massive backdrop behind this. Sometimes I think that these folklores, myths were created. Yeah?
No, I can get that. The idea that, don't walk outside at night time because there are jinns in the trees to scare kids from not going out. But I was wondering, is there actually something behind it?
I've not come across any narrations that talk about this. Right? These are usually just stories passed down from one generation to the other. Don't, walk under a tree during Maghrib. Why is that? I recently had this, one person was saying, well, because, I don't know, during that time, the trees, I don't know, I can't.
What I heard is actually there's a particular type of tree that blossoms in the night, and that particular tree you shouldn't walk under, or essentially be najis at the time I'm walking under in the night under these particular trees and stuff, that you can get possessed by a jinn or anything, which brings us on to the next bit of our discussion, which would be the aspect of what we were talking about. You want to still carry on with that one? I want to jump into that one.
Huh?
Yeah, I want to get into the...
What time are we here until?
Another 25 minutes?
25 minutes. Yeah, we got time. It reminds me of this incident where there was this particular valley. I can't remember where, in Yemen or somewhere. And this valley was primarily used for trade. And, the people who are responsible for the trade kind of created the myth amongst the people in the village that don't go in this valley because there are jinns there and you'll be affected by the jinn, just to keep people out from interfering in their trade. Right? Just to have monopoly on that particular area of trade, they created this story that kept the people away from that valley. And this tale kind of carried on for many, many years, many decades, and people actually believed that there were jinns living there.
So there's this, when I went for Umrah, there was a place in Makkah they actually go to, it's called Jinn Valley, right? They take you on the bus, switch off the engine, and then the bus actually starts to move in it, right? And then you start going uphill, so the engine and everything is off, puts it in neutral, just puts the handbrake off, and then I remember saying it's just literally just going, but I think it's to do with like the polarization of the magnetic field or something pulling it towards there, but that particular place is called Jinn Valley. So I don't know if you ever heard of that or not.
So the van just
Yeah. So if you YouTube it afterwards, you go type in Jinn Valley, and for our viewers obviously online that want to have a quick search while we're talking about it, they can see it. So you'll see that the bus driver, they switch their engines off, put the handbrake down, and literally the bus starts going. And it's actually like a hill as well, so it actually starts going up a hill like, properly. Decent speeds as well.
You know, interesting you mentioned about YouTube. There's a question. The power of the jinn compared to human beings. Yeah? Are they considered to be more powerful than human beings in terms of strength, physical strength? There's a very interesting ayah in the Holy Quran. وَقَالَ إِفْرِيتٌ مِنَ الْجِنِّ at the time of Nabi Sulaiman. Yeah? When he asked for the throne of Bilqis to be brought back to him. Then the jinn stands up, Ifrit, and he says, I'll bring it to you before you stand up.
Yeah.
So the idea is that the ulama said, look at this verse. This verse is talking about the physical power of the jinn, that they can, number one, interact with material, physical material, things around us, number one. And number two, the strength that they have.
And the speed as well.
And the speed, right? In the time of Nabi Sulaiman, Allah talks about, when we talked about the whole discussion of Nabi Sulaiman, right? We mentioned like a few, I think about 6-7 lectures on the whole history of Nabi Sulaiman. We said that Sulaiman's power that was given to him by Allah was an enhancement of the power that was given to him to his father, Nabi Dawood. So Nabi Dawood's kingdom was great, but Allah enforced it even more for Nabi Sulaiman, made it even more great for Nabi Sulaiman. And there's a few verses that talk about this. And Allah says that the power that Nabi Sulaiman has, فَسَخَرْنَا لَهُ الرِّيحَ تَجْرِي, you know, he had power of controlling the winds. And then he talks about the jinn, وَالشَّيَاطِينَ كُلَّ بَنَّاءٍ وَغَوَاسٍ. Right? The jinns, they had a responsibility to build kingdoms, palaces, homes, whatever. وَغَوَاسٍ, and they were divers. Now going back to the starting of our discussion, jinns are made of fire. And we're made of clay. We have limitations. And these limitations don't apply to jinns. Okay. Now when you go on YouTube, right, you have all of these videos that talk about the mysterious landmarks in the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Yeah, exactly. And today archaeologists are baffled. They're like, how did primitive human beings so many thousands of years ago build this particular monument or this structure the way it is?
Yeah, so is it
without having the tools and the infrastructures to actually, carve into the rocks and so on.
Like the Aztec city.
Yeah.
Is it in Machu Picchu? Somewhere like that?
No idea. But these mysterious landmarks, look, the Quran is talking about them. That Sulaiman's power over the jinns was that the jinns used to build for him. That's what enhanced Sulaiman's kingdom, because none of the other kings and queens of his time had that power. So when the Queen of Sheba enters his city or his kingdom, she sees landmarks that she has never seen before. And because these were built by the jinns. The jinns don't have limitations the way we do. They can ascend. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a few moments. They can ascend into heights. We can't. وَغَوَاسٍ, and they were able to dive deep into the oceans. There's only so far we can go into the ocean before the pressure gets unbearable for us. Yeah. There's no technology that can go. There's only limitations of how far deep into the ocean that we can go. And these technological submarines, whatever they're called, they're, billion-dollar machines, exactly. The jinns don't have that limitations. They can dive as deep as they want. And they were able to extract the pearls from the ocean beds and bring them back to Sulaiman. So Sulaiman had, number one, buildings that no other kings had ever seen before. And number two, he had jewelry that no other kings and queens had seen before, because they were from the depths of the oceans. Right? Because they were made of fire, again in Surah Al-Jinn. Surah Al-Jinn is a very interesting surah if you actually want to know who the jinn were. It's a very small surah. Open it up. Read what the verses talk about. And it characterizes, it attributes all of the different qualities of the jinns. What they can do, what they can't do. Are they believers? Are they disbelievers? And so on. One verse particularly speaks about how the jinns have the ability to ascend into the heavens. The lowest of the heavens. Very interesting verse. Let me just put up the verse. verse number 9, وَأَنَّا كُنَّا نَقْعُدُ مِنْهَا مَقَاعِدَ لِلسَّمْعِ, that the jinn used to ascend into the skies and they would hear the chatter from the angels. They would hear the chatter of the angels. So the angels at that time, they used to talk about certain things that would happen, in the heavens. And the jinns would kind of eavesdrop. They would hear some of the aspects of ilm al-ghaib, aspects of which is not known. And then they would come back down and they would relay that information to human beings. So whenever the human being wanted to know about the ilm al-ghaib, they would summon the jinn, and then the jinn would kind of take advantage of the human being and give him ilm al-ghaib and enhance their own power and so on and so forth. Because they were taken as like royalty, like kings, yeah? Right? And then that's why you have...
So can the jinn still do that?
At the time of the Holy Prophet, that power was taken away from them.
Oh, so the final prophet.
Yeah, the final prophet. So when the Rasulullah came with his message, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, that power was removed from them. فَمَنْ يَسْتَمِعَ الْآنِ يَجِدْ لَهُ شِهَابًا رَصَدًا. Very interesting verse. So the jinns would kind of take advantage of human beings by eavesdropping from the angels and then giving that information to the human beings, enhancing their own power. And in the process, deviating human beings as well. But that process stopped at the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam. That's why you come across these verses where God talks about how the stars are missiles.
Oh, the jinns being kicked out of heaven or something.
Exactly. Yeah, in Surah Al-Mulk.
Yeah, a shooting star apparently is the jinn being kicked out of heaven.
Yeah, وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيا. Well, not shooting stars. It's more like... Yeah, okay, whatever. وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيا. So we beautified the lower heavens of the earth, of the heavens with stars. Right? بِمَصَابِيهَا وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينَ. And we made these stars like missiles for the shayateen. Yeah, so they were like, weapons used against the shayateen to like drive them out, kick them out. So it all comes back to that story where they're able to ascend, take information, come back down, and relay that information to us. And in the process, they would be kicked out. Yeah. So very interesting nature of who the jinn were. So going back in terms of their power is much more than human beings. They have the ability, right? But then coming back to the previous discussion, we have a greater prestige than they do. Simply because we are the carriers of Risala. Right. Yeah.
Can we go into the...
I think are we time to move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Time for the main event.
It's time for the part we've all been waiting for. What is it?
Exorcism.
The exorcisms and the possessions of human beings by the jinn. How did that all come about in the first place?
Before you answer that as well, same point, but we also see it's not just specifically in Islam. So if we look at exactly like what you said, the movies Exorcism and places, there's a lot down into the Christianity field where they have these things, these possessions, Rome and things like that, where they have these priests who exorcise apparently demons inside people. So there's a concept there in Christianity, and we hear it a lot, in all honesty, in the subcontinent. We hear about, so we hear a lot about it, like India, Pakistan, all these kind of places where we hear about possessions and things like that. So obviously, hopefully, inshallah, Sheikh can enlighten us on that.
The whole idea of exorcism is a very contentious issue.
What do you mean by that?
Point of debate.
Right.
Does it really exist? Does it not? How? It essentially comes back to a more broader question. And the broader question is, can the jinn have an interaction with human beings? So I'm sure you've come across this. Human beings marrying jinn. It's laughable.
I've heard, for example, I remember someone told me that there was this woman and she was walking and then a jinn fell in love with her and somehow they got married. I don't know how it works or who does the nikah for that. Like, which Maulana would do the nikah for a jinn?
The Ahlul Sunnah, they have a hadith from Abu Huraira. Yeah? They say that Bilqis's husband or father was a jinn. Right? So they believe that, yeah, it's absolutely possible. If you do a Google search, half of them say, no, it's not possible. So they have the same opinion that we do. And our opinion is that, no,
So just
it's not
I
possible.
just want to go back to that. You said Bilqis's father might have been a jinn.
Yeah.
So a jinn and a human can make a half jinn, half human child?
At the end of the day, this hadith goes back to Abu Huraira, right?
So we'll take it with a pinch of salt or something.
Yeah, exactly. When you ask our ulama say absolutely not. Jinns cannot marry human beings.
No.
How is that even possible? They're made of fire, we're made of clay. Right? How does that relationship work? It all comes back to common sense. It all comes back to logical aspects. You see, Islam, the precepts of Islam complement aql. The moment it doesn't, that's when you start raising questions. All right? So this is one of them. Can human beings marry jinns? The other question is, can human beings speak with jinns? Yes, we mentioned that in the course of the debate discussion. Can jinns harm human beings? And one of them is about exorcism. Can the jinn enter the human being? Take control of the body of the human being. Speak through the human being. And even perform certain actions through the human being. What does your aql say?
So from what I've seen on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
apparently they can.
Yeah.
And it seemed, well, when the videos I've seen, their voices are very deep and they take control and they
see
can...
a lot of it in Sunni Islam. You see a lot of it. There's plenty of videos there. Even when I used to go to the mosque, there was plenty of discussions that happened where people were possessed by a jinn and it was speaking to them in a different language and all this kind of stuff, and exactly how he said, deep voices coming out from like a woman and all this kind of stuff, But it's definitely there in that part of
Yeah, you just YouTube
theology.
it and it's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what do you think about that?
But coming to your lectures, one of the points that you said was sometimes our aql can't perceive what's actually there. Like, so when you're talking, I know it's a different thing altogether. It was about rulings of Islam, the fiqh issues, like certain things our aql can comprehend, certain things our aql can't comprehend. So,
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's plausible.
Plausible? All right. 50-50.
So in terms of the possession, this is what I was wondering. Does the jinn, for example, go out of their way to possess someone? Or is it a human saying to a jinn, look, I want you to ruin that person's life. Can you do it for me?
Okay, I see where you're coming from.
So, like, for me, I can't imagine a jinn just saying one day, you know what, there's a guy walking there,
Yeah.
I'm going to go possess him and ruin his life.
Comes down to like this voodoo, black magic
Yeah.
thing.
So, jinns, if you provoke a jinn,
No.
does it have the power to kind of overwhelm your body?
Kind of, but is it a case, I think a jinn, in order to possess someone, would have to be given a reason, first of all, and secondly, another human would probably have to tell them, I want you to go ruin someone else's life.
On that point as well, exactly what you're just saying, can it actually happen? We have these things where people essentially go to sleep and sleepwalk, where they're not in control of themselves and they're doing whatever they're doing. This kind of. So if that can essentially happen in that, then why if we already know that jinns have certain abilities themselves and we can communicate with them as well, then why wouldn't that also be?
But there's
plausible?
a science behind sleepwalking, isn't there?
Yeah, but if that can actually happen where the person themselves don't know what's happening,
Yeah.
right, then surely this can obviously happen as well. I know there's a science behind it. There might be even a science behind this, but we just don't know about it.
All right. Interesting. What if I told you there's no such thing as exorcism?
Explain to me. Show me where you're coming from.
Show you where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting story of Abu Hanifa. I'm sure you've heard of it many times before. Abu Hanifa comes to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam.
Behlul throws.
No.
Oh, not that
He
one.
comes to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, I've got a list of questions.
Yeah.
The Imam is busy. But then he sees a young man. Imam Musa alayhi salam. Yeah, Imam Qadim alayhi salam. He says, Abu Hanifa, you've come to see my father. My father's busy. Why don't you tell me these questions? Maybe I'll, in the course of our discussion, I'll answer it for you. And he says, you're a child. These are deep theological questions. Have you heard the story?
Yeah.
Yeah? And then Abu Hanifa says, okay, the actions that we perform are we responsible for those actions, or is it God making us perform these actions?
Yeah.
Because essentially the Ash'a'ira, nowadays is different. The whole theological backdrop is different. But in those days, the Ash'a'ira used to believe that Allah controls your action.
You don't essentially have that free will.
You don't have free will. So Allah, the good that you do, it is Allah making you do that good. The bad that you do, Allah is making you do that bad. So Imam Qadim replies, well, if that's the case, then what's the purpose of heaven and hell? Right? The whole purpose of heaven is that we're rewarded for our good. If Allah made us do good, then what's the point of rewarding us?
Yeah.
Likewise, punishment. If Allah made us commit a sin, why would He punish us? Now replace Allah with jinn. Same question. Replace Allah with jinn. A jinn possessed you, Hassan.
Yeah.
And the jinn made you go and eat pork, for example, or drink alcohol.
Yeah.
You could, on the day of judgment, turn around and say, Ya Allah, I got possessed by a jinn.
Yeah, so that's the jinn's accountability on the day of judgment, though, isn't it?
But why would Allah allow it to happen to you? Why would Allah suspend your free will and your power of choice simply by allowing a jinn to enter your body? That goes against the whole justice of Allah.
But then same point again with the sleepwalking issue. Somebody can essentially be in such a next level sleepwalk where they walk outside their house and get run over by a car because they walked on the road.
But the aql is not there, is there?
Yeah, so the same thing there. If you're possessed as well, your aql's not there as well. The jinn's controlling you.
Sleep is different from a jinn possessing you.
No, but essentially it's a similar thing because you're going dormant because they've taken over your bodily control.
No, but sleep is different from a jinn overtaking you. In fact, there's an ayah in the Holy Quran that goes against this entirely.
Go on then.
On the day of judgment, when the whole judgment has finished, the whole process of accountability, وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانُ لَمَّا قُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ, and shaitan will say, when all of the accountability has come to an end, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعَدَ الْحَقِّ. Allah had promised you the truth, right? Allah gave you a promise, and that promise was absolutely truth. وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ. And I promised you, Shaitan is saying, and I promised you something, but I
Lied.
lied to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lied to you. وَمَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. I did not have any authority over you. The jinn do not have any authority over human beings at all. And this is something that the ulama have rephrased over and over again. From amongst them, there's an arif who passed away very, very recently, Sayyid Adil Alawi.
Okay.
He was one of the students of Sayyid Muhammad Husayn and Najafi Mar'ashi, who was a spiritual man, very, very spiritual man, arif. And he says that it is impossible for a jinn to possess a body of a human being. It's not possible. The jinns do not have any power over the human being except through words. Waswasa.
All right.
Right? وَمَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ إِلَّا أَنْ دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتَكُمْ. It's like I did not have any power over you except that I invited you and you accepted it.
Yeah,
Yeah, فَلَا تَلُومُنِي وَلُومُ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not blame me. Blame yourselves.
Okay. So we rule out exorcisms according
Exorcism, yeah, absolutely, man. I don't
Then where does it come then from Christianity when we see it so, the Vatican and all this kind of stuff that we hear about, then surely then that would be...
I have no idea. It's hard to say. It's hard to say where the roots of this stemmed from. So all of these videos on YouTube...
I mean, it's quite a big thing, for example, in the movies you see, like The Exorcism. There's probably about... There are about... Yeah, that's quite a... It doesn't seem like it's come out of nowhere, sort of thing. It doesn't seem like someone's just thought, yeah, we're going to have a random demon possess this young girl, and then we're going to have a priest. We're going to have a priest come, and the priest is going to make this woman float, and the jinn's going to come out of her body, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It does seem like there is some religious source to it.
No idea.
No idea.
But from an Islamic perspective, even Sayyid Muhammad Rouhani, he mentions this. He says it is absolutely not possible.
Okay. For a jinn to possess a human.
For a jinn to possess a human being.
Or
Harming, again, very interesting. They can harm us the way human beings can harm us.
So a jinn can essentially kill us.
A jinn can harm you. Kill you, you're jumping to an extreme. قال إفريت من الجن. Who's going to bring me the throne? Ifrit said, I'll bring you the throne. The throne of Bilqis is physical.
Yeah, and they could pick it up and
So
bring
they-
it if they wanted.
he had the ability to pick it up and bring it all the way to Suleiman's
Okay.
kingdom. They can harm us the way any other human being, the way you can harm me. Yeah? Would a jinn randomly just decide to harm you?
No. Makes no sense.
Unless you provoke
Provoke.
them.
How do you provoke a jinn?
I have no idea. I mean, I'm sure there are different sciences behind this. I'm sure if you sacrifice a goat and do something
Walk,
with its
walk
blood,
under a
yeah.
few of them trees that we were
Yeah.
talking about tonight.
Is it, for example, let's say we were doing this podcast now and we started to cuss the jinns, for example.
absolutely not.
Would that be something then we'd walk out of the mosque and there'd be 3 or 4 jinns waiting for us?
And the story of Nabi Ayyub, yeah, Allama Tabatabai is of this opinion as well in his Al-Mizan. He says, look, when it comes to the interaction between the jinn and the Nabi, right? He says that the jinn or shaitan do not have any authority over the aql. But physically they can harm. And shaitan harms Nabi Ayyub. Takes away his health, takes away his family, his children, takes away his rizq, his business, takes away his home, worsens his health as well.
But isn't that because God
Allowed
him to? Yeah.
But because Nabi Ayyub was a prophet, right? Otherwise shaitan wouldn't have that ability. But when it comes to normal humanity, normal human beings, the jinn do have the ability to harm us the way I can harm you, for example. Yeah? And then, of course, the next logical, natural question that arises is, how do I protect myself from the jinn? And this is when all of these surahs come into being, yeah? When all of these different surahs, according to the riwayat, speak about if you recite Ayat al-Kursi, Surah al-Baqarah, the Mawdu'atain, for example, all of this helps you seek protection
Qul
from
as
the
well,
jinn.
innit?
Yeah, from harming you physically.
So coming on to this, I had an interesting one as well that I was somebody had sent in earlier. Basically, we see it a lot in the music industry at the moment. So you'll see like these subtle signs of like Satan and all this kind of stuff going on, and then like sacrificing animals, to Satan. And it's a growing thing. So it's not like Satanism is essentially like a religion that people actually follow. So they're worshipping Satan, they sacrifice certain things. Does that essentially, is that true, and does that actually help the jinns when you're doing all these kind of things, or is it just like
It doesn't
completely
help
baseless?
them. I'm of the belief that it doesn't help them. I'm of the belief that I'm sure that jinn is probably laughing away, having
Having a chuckle at what they're
duped
doing.
the human being for doing certain things.
You
You
know,
know,
have
it's
that-
probably having a laugh at the end of the day,
That-
saying, "Oh, I made them do this, or I made them do that."
Yeah.
And
Well, that Hollywood saying, sold your soul
yeah,
to the devil.
yeah.
So we have that quite Freemasonry and all that kind of stuff.
Again, there's no it's like they want to achieve power, fame, prestige,
Yeah.
and they seek help from the jinn. And we have this in our community as well, yeah? Don't think that we're not like this. We're different.
Can you
We
expand?
believe that the jinn have ilm al-ghaib. We believe that the jinn have ilm al-ghaib,
Right.
for example. They have the knowledge of success, for example. Oh, time's up.
No. Sorry, carry on, Sheikh. Sorry. That they don't have ilm al-ghaib.
Yeah, like we believe that the jinn have ilm al-ghaib and they have knowledge of the unseen. They know the secrets of success. So let me interact with them and they can tell me the formula. It's not like that. When Sulaiman died, Allah speaks about this in the Quran. When Sulaiman died, no one knew that he had died until he was resting on that stick.
Yeah, and the
And
ants
then
ate
the
it.
ants ate the termites ate the stick,
Yeah.
and then the stick collapsed,
He
and
fell.
he collapsed on the floor. At that time, both insan and the jinn
Did not
knew
know.
that Sulaiman had died. And then Allah in the verse makes a point. He says that the jinns didn't even know that he had died, meaning that they don't have knowledge of the unseen.
But isn't that also like a case by case, like exactly like what you said, what we were saying about different levels of human beings and different levels of taqwa and marifah and things like that. Essentially, can't that be the same case for like we hear this like okay we talk about Ayatollah Behjat, like some of the things that we say praying two namazes in different places because his marifa was so high. Can't that also be the case for jinns as well, when they reach a certain level that they have certain characteristics and powers that other jinns don't have?
Yeah,
So
absolutely possible, plausible, definitely. But would they give that information to you? They would have cash. They would have certain access to reality.
Yeah.
But would they pass on that information to someone like you and me?
Depends if you're boys with them or
we
not.
come to him and say, "Oh, I want to be rich. What should I do? What business should I start?
magic
What
formula.
amal should I do?" It's like, they wouldn't just freely give that information out to anyone because that is a responsibility in itself. And if a jinn has that mukashifa, that power of spirituality, I'm sure he wouldn't give that information out as well. When you come back to this whole Hollywood thing, it's all based on ill intentions.
Yeah.
And you just look at their end, each and every one of them, all those who are caught in such a agenda. They don't leave this world in a
good
pleasant, in a good way.
It all comes crashing down.
It all comes crashing down. It's because they get fooled. The whole essence, the whole idea of it, the whole foundations is shaky.
So are we saying essentially somebody has duped them into thinking that by doing this, they've got rich out of doing that, and then they essentially attain that wealth and that height, but then you saying that they come to think that it's false then, but they've already achieved what they've done through the means that they've done though.
Possible. Imagine a person who is absolutely naive, approaches you and says, "Hassan, how do I become rich?" And if you don't have good intentions, if you're not spiritual, you're not mindful of your actions, you could take that naivety and work it against them. And I wholeheartedly believe that some of the jinns do this.
So do you think the jinns, for example, we go to them to ask them for help, and they use help, and they use it as an opportunity to deceive us, basically?
Yeah.
So what about we talked about it slightly, but the harm part, like you hear about humans, I don't know how they do it, but they go to the jinn, for example, and ask them to harm so-and-so. How does that interaction happen?
How does that interaction happen? That's beyond me. That's absolutely beyond me. Does it even harm the person that they want to harm, or does that harm come back to them?
Okay.
Yeah. Again, the jinn are like free spirits, the way you and I are free spirits. You can't really control them. You can't really put a rein around them and say, "Do what I tell you to do." I'll slaughter a goat and I'll do this and I'll do that, and you now have to do what I tell you to do. It doesn't work that way. They have free will the way we have free will. They have the power to make choices the way we can make choices.
Yeah, so we used to hear a story about a certain Maulana in the Sunni world before. He's basically say that he had a jinn under his control essentially, and he would be able to tell it what to do, and it would do whatever you would say and this kind of stuff. So a similar thing, not with the harm side of things, but we hear them sort of stories as well.
Yeah, there are some. There's somewhere in the sub-Asian continent that there's one old man who lives in the forest that every time he smacks his stick on the ground, the jinns get scared or something. I'm not sure how true that is. But yeah, there are plenty of stories in the sub-Asian continent about interactions with the jinn.
Plenty
I'm
of
sure
stories.
you've heard a few stories being in Dar es Salaam yourself, right? I'm sure you've come across a few stories.
They're everywhere, man.
I'm sure.
Everywhere.
Share a story, go on. Share a story with us.
Honestly, in one ear, out the other.
It's like that.
That's the type of person.
Being
I am.
diplomatic.
Just I think final question probably, but can a jinn take the form of anyone else? Can they, for example, could a jinn come as you?
As a human being,
They came as a snake then.
yeah. So we have narrations, right, that it came in the form of animals, black crows, black dogs, snakes as well. As human beings, again, we have narrations that shaitan took a shape of a human being. Yeah, during the time of just before the hijrah of the Prophet, during the assassination, the old man.
Yeah.
Even with the story of Yusuf alayhi salam as well, right? Where he deceived the brothers, where he gave them the idea to get rid of Yusuf alayhi salam and put him in the well.
Perhaps, yeah. I've not looked into that, but
You know the series that they had made, Nabi Yusuf. So in that particular one of the episodes, it says that Shaitan basically took the form of a human being, comes to the brothers and essentially gives them the idea of the plot to try and kill Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam.
Sure, yeah, absolutely plausible. But any other human being without a reason or even with a reason, I don't know. Yeah, it's plausible, I guess.
Shall we conclude?
We should,
Yes.
inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
That's it.
Thank you so much, viewers, for
No,
joining us. Inshallah, we may be back next month or the month after, depending on Sheikh's schedule.
Sheikh's schedule. Astaghfirullah. I'm sure we'll have many guests coming into MKSI. And we can have a hearty discussion as well.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum,
Inshallah.
dear brothers and sisters. Hope you enjoyed the show. Catch you next time. Qadafis.